Welcome to Bat Therapy, mental health through the lens of comics and film. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We're your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Emilia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keeden Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources.
Okay, today's going to be an interesting one. I'm excited. So, let me see. Like, when we first started the podcast, I actually had a friend who was like, wouldn't you say Bruce Wayne's superpower is being rich? And I was like, it's not that simple. Like, yes, that's one of the things that make up who he is and what he's able to do. But there are all these other things about him. But we're coming at it from a different angle today, which I think is going to be really interesting. So we want to broach the topic of, can Bruce Wayne, in the mainstream as we think of him, be as rich as he is and still be a good guy? Like, not be a villain.
In comic book world, yes, he is.
So you want me to have a suspension of reality going on here?
There has to be a suspension of reality because, first of all, there's no way there's any billionaires as good as Bruce Wayne is. And I have been researching. I have a list.
Oh.
I have a list. He is. So, yes, Batman does. Yeah, Batman, crime, all that, fights crime. It is what it is. Right. However, Bruce Wayne does so much good. And here's the thing that people don't realize, and they kind of forget. Bruce tried to fight crime in a different way. He tried to join the FBI. He did it for 6 weeks.
Really? Like mainstream storyline?
In Batman Year One, Bruce
Remember that?
entered FBI training, and he learned that it wouldn't work because there was too much corruption in every system. Yeah. And so he said, "Hey, I'm gonna have to operate outside the law." So first and foremost, that's how he decided on Batman. Now, that's not even touching on some of the other stuff. I'm not even going to touch on the philanthropy yet. However,
I love how you're already like, I'm defending him to the death here.
I'm not going to lie. I'm gonna.
And I'm going to be devil's advocate on the other side. This is going to be great.
I'm gonna. So, when Lex Luthor ran for president, he was trying to control all of the press. He was trying to make sure nothing bad came out about him. And Lex Luthor owns every single newspaper in Metropolis except for one. Bruce Wayne bought the Daily Planet just so there would still be truthful news coming out.
Okay. As long as he kept his hands off, which... Yeah.
He absolutely did, because then Lex Luthor decided to frame him for murder. And Bruce had to spend a year clearing his name.
Actually, I love that storyline. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite storylines.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll give you that. That's probably a good use of his money. Okay. So, all right, you researched the comics. This is why we work so well. There's a podcast through the American Psychological Association, speaking of psychology, and I happened upon a podcast episode that is called The Psychology of Wealth, Empathy, and Entitlement. So there's a psychologist, Dr. Paul Piff, who researches a ton of this stuff, and essentially like what can you hold on to empathy when you end up with a lot of wealth, and like what are characteristics as you have wealth and different things like that. And so One of the things that's standing out to me, though, is you were like, okay, so he saw that all these systems are broken. So what did he do? He said, I will be the uncorruptible, and I am the one who can solve all of these things as Batman. And so there tends to be more sense of entitlement the more money that you have. And so one of the things they did this like super cool study where they essentially rigged a game of Monopoly. You played with a partner, and one of the people got like double, like you got 2 dice or 1 dice to roll. When you pass go, you get $200 or $100, right? So they essentially made it so like one person obviously had a leg up. So the person with the leg up always won. And then they noticed all of these things about their mannerisms. They would like spread out their money to show it all off over time. They would act a little bit like more cocky and confident and talk about how much they were winning the more the game went on. At the end, they asked people why they won, and they would tell strategies. They wouldn't mention the fact that they had a leg up in the rules from the start. So there's like this whole like sense of like entitlement and things that like come with like wealth and things where would it if Bruce didn't have the affluence that he had, would he have that like sense of like, you know what, everything's broken, but you know who can fix it? Me. On my own, I can fix it.
So I don't think that Bruce thinks for a second that he can fix it. I think he knows he has a part to play, but there's no way he can fix all of it. I think he knows that because he leaves so much of it to other people. He leaves so much of it to Lucius Fox. He leaves a lot of it to Commissioner Gordon, right? He leaves a lot of it up to them. And that's the thing. When Batman's whole thing is, the reason I'm doing this is because the system doesn't work. And if the system worked, I'd stop tomorrow. Like, that's the thing.
Don't you think he could put his money, just like he did with the newspaper?
Yes.
Arguably, if we're going to argue like, oh, well, Bruce can be Batman because of all of these different like traits and things that are just so impressive about him.
Yes.
Wouldn't you argue he could use that same stuff, come up with other ideas like the newspaper, and just spend all of his money changing the system for the better?
Yes.
And fixing the systems that are there instead of beating people up on the streets.
I'm so glad that you said that. So here's a fun fact also. Batman carries business cards in his utility belt and gives them out to people that are less fortunate while he's fighting crime. He's been doing that.
Story says that.
He's been doing it since 1940. It was it's like Batman 660 something. It was a long time ago, but more modern.
Loved how deep dive you went into all this. This is excellent.
It's because all right. So some people simp for Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Bezos. Like, some people are just like, I'm going to defend them to the day I die. If I'm going to defend someone, it was going to be a fake billionaire that's super awesome and that's super great. And so I don't mind dying on this particular hill.
Okay. So sending out business cards to help people less fortunate.
Right. But all right. So first and foremost, during No Man's Land, when Gotham was a complete wreck, he paid for Gotham to be rebuilt.
That's true. I do remember that, yeah.
He paid for Gotham to be rebuilt. Not only that, he sent helicopters to get aid in to people to get food in. But he also has the Wayne Foundation. Now, the Wayne Foundation is made up of two different things. The Thomas Wayne Foundation and the Martha Wayne Foundation. The Thomas Wayne Foundation is all about medicine and science, and it funds the clinic in Park Row. So no one in Crime Alley has to pay for healthcare.
Really?
Yes, no one in Crime Alley pays for healthcare. He also has over a dozen other clinics around Gotham where there's free healthcare given. So that's the Thomas Wayne Foundation. It also awards money for research for medicine. Now, the Martha Wayne Foundation is all about the urban revitalization of Gotham. It's for families and education. So the Martha Wayne Foundation runs all of the orphanages in Gotham. It creates and funds most of the schools in Gotham. It gives grants to artists. It sponsors Family Finders, which is an organization made to reunite families who have been separated
that are like torn apart by all the horrific things in Gotham.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. In addition to running lots of soup kitchens, it also pays for all of the scholarships to Gotham Academy. It also, here's a fun one, maintains all of the museums in Gotham and is a big sponsor of the local theater scene. Little more. Like I said, I did my research here. The Wayne Foundation also funds something called Victims Inc., which is aimed to help victims of violent crimes. And then also Tamara Fox, Lucius's daughter, and Tim Drake funded a company called Neon Knights, which is funded by the Wayne Foundation. And it's geared towards helping at-risk youth, former gang members, and teenagers that are likely to join gangs.
So like more like rehabilitation or like preventative kind of stuff for violence and everything.
Yes. When Selena Kyle...
Go ahead.
But
this is a fun one.
This is a fun one. When Selena Kyle stole money from Black Mask, he helped her launder her money in order to get a community center built in the East End in her neck of the woods in Gotham.
Nice.
I could go longer, but here's yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all right. Now, counterpoint, one of the other things that research tends to find is that there's still a lot that they're looking at, but I think a lot of times there's this misconception of like, oh, if someone has a certain amount of money, they tend to vote for a certain party or do, certain thing. And so one of the things is that it's not as black and white as that, but what you do see is that money and voting and things tends to go into things that will maintain the status quo. So,
Yes.
for example, I mean, we know about like super PACs and all this nonsense that goes on with politics, for example. So essentially, okay, so he's putting all this money into trying to help Gotham, but is he also putting money into trying to, for example, make sure that everyone has a living wage? People can afford things without having to need a scholarship or without having to need to get, like putting people on more of an even keel, which, I mean, you mentioned a few things that could potentially fit that category, but is he gonna put his money and his vote in the box that, essentially like balances things out? In Wayne Industries, is everyone getting a livable wage?
So that's a very good question. And he has tried to make sure that happens in his company. He has tried to do it on a larger scale.
Interesting.
But guess who thwarted it?
Was it Luther?
The Court of...
damn Court of Owls. Of course they did.
Yes, he actually did try and make sure something like that happened. And it was thwarted in Gotham by the Court of Owls, who, guess what? Wanted to keep the status quo. And so it's one of those things where because we have to think, we've been talking about Batman a very long time. He's clearly someone that he happens to be a billionaire, but I don't think he really cares about money. He definitely knows it's
it's easy not to care about money if it's always there.
He easily knows it's a hell of a resource to have, but it's also one of those things where I don't think he's actually looking around trying to get more of it. Right? He's
fair. If anything, he's at risk of like playing things too fast
bankrupting
and
himself.
loose and bankrupting
Right.
himself. I mean, there's plenty of storylines where he ends up bankrupting himself.
He still funds the Justice League and pays for all the damages that get caused by the Justice League. And the Justice League is all over the world.
Dude, Bruce Wayne could be like a trillionaire.
He's
like,
yeah,
like the amount of money
rich.
he would have if he wasn't. Because think about how much expense that would be to fix everything the Justice League break. I mean, they break things on an enormous scale.
Yeah, he's insanely rich. At this point, if we listed out all the things he actually does do, the big question is, how is he still making money? But at the same time, there's so many stories of companies where the head person decided to pay everybody in the company a really good wage, and the company actually made more money because of it.
Because people are going to feel more loyal and committed.
Right. And so it's one of those things where I'm not terribly shocked that he's still getting richer because he's doing it the right way. And I think he's fighting the good fight the best that he can on that side of being Bruce Wayne. But there's also a part that, like I said, you have to suspend disbelief at some point, because when you look at all that he does, it's like, that's not a real billionaire. Like, what?
This doesn't fit.
No one builds that many hospitals. Like, what the hell? Like,
without going for profit.
Right.
So here's something very realistic, though. So one of the other interesting studies that Dr. Piff brought up was so I forget where they found this trend, but they found a trend that was surprising at one point, where the more affluent a person was, the more money they had, the more likely it seemed that they were to like skirt the rules, or break a little law here or there, like small things, like get away with stuff. And they were like, let's toy with this a little bit. And so it was so interesting. So apparently, obviously there are exceptions, but there's a really high correlation or association between how much money you have and what kind of car you own. Definitely there are exceptions, but for the most part, the nicer the car, the more money you have. And so they decided to, I think it was California or something where they live. So when someone's at a crosswalk and they want to walk, it is the law that you're supposed to stop your car, let the person cross before you go.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they did was they picked a street, and whenever a car was coming, they had someone go to the crosswalk and do the exact same thing every time. They'd be at the crosswalk, they'd make eye contact with the car and see if the car stopped. And they had some like people in the bushes and stuff who would like take down all the information about the car so that they would, be able to guess how much money this person might have. And sure enough, they found that you were less likely to stop for this person if you made more money, or if you had a more money maker car.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought of Bruce with this, where I was like, you know what? I have all this money. All these things are broken. Let me fight crime as a vigilante, which is, skirting the rules. It's like, hey, would he have had the balls to do that, essentially, if he wasn't rich? Because there could have been part of that mindset that was actually like worked into it that resulted in like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to fight crime, but not through like you were saying, the FBI or the police. I'm going to be a vigilante. But I thought that was like a fun one to connect to Bruce Wayne, since, he's skirting the rules.
Absolutely. And it's funny because we're going back to that original question. Is his superpower his money? Fine. It absolutely is. Because you know what? Spider-Man has superpowers and he's broke as hell. That's the thing. Like it's it's one of those things. It's like, all right, look, fine. Either you can be a superhero with powers and lead a regular life, or you can be super rich and have your gadgets and
which tends
all
to
of
be
your
the trend.
tech.
Yep.
It absolutely is.
I mean, it's definitely a trend.
Yeah, Mr. Terrific, Green Arrow,
Yep.
Ted Cord, Bruce Wayne, they started out just smart, then they got superpowers. But either way, like they were, yeah. But Tony Stark, yeah, yeah. And so yeah, you have all of these.
Tony Stark would be harder to argue that he's a good guy with all that money.
Well, I mean, it's what his company is making, right? Like that's the thing. Like,
yeah, he did try to change it. Yeah, we'll stick with Bruce Wayne. It's complicated enough just doing one.
Yeah, no
But
one asked
you're
what
right.
happens to. No one asked what happened to Sokovia and whose fault it was.
And so here's the thing is like, I mean, you can argue like part of the riches being the superpower or like what leads to someone being a vigilante is the resources, plain and simple. I mean, the resource of the money itself, the resources of like, you know, your connections and the ability to like get what you need, the resources of because you have that money, you're not having to focus on like your 40-hour plus or more a week job to like make ends meet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that might also be a part of it is this piece where if you have more money, you don't think the rules necessarily apply to you quite as stringently, based on this experiment they did. And so, you could also argue that potentially part of it is like because this person has more money, they're thinking, hey, you know what I could do? I could do this thing that isn't within the normal like sense of laws and rules and setup of society. And someone without that money, just like how it adjusts how your brain thinks about things, could be a whole facet of this whole superhero thing.
And that is kind of how society is because it's one of those things. I mean, you look at even here in the United States, when a celebrity commits a crime, it's not very often that they end up going to jail for it. Even if it's one of those things where they're caught red-handed, it looks really bad for them. Even then, if they do get sentenced, it's way less than what a regular person would get sentenced. Why? I don't know, but I bet it involves money somehow, right? It's one of those things like, I mean, we can look at all the way back to like the O.J. Simpson trial, right? Money puts you in a position where there are some laws that don't really apply to you. Like, I'll give you an example. There are plenty of celebrities out there that drive sports cars and get speeding tickets all the time.
Yeah.
They don't care about how much their insurance goes up. They don't care about how much the ticket is.
Well, that's the thing too, is like some of the risks are one, they're just less. So like you said, because of how our perceptions of people work and because of how money and power work and all that stuff, like you're probably going to there's less risk involved in terms of what might happen. But then also, even if you do have a punishment, it's not going to hit you as hard as somebody else, theoretically, depending on, this was like minor infringement stuff. It wasn't like murder. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. Just the piece of, vigilante, no big deal. And so, and here's the thing too, is I think there's like, this is a tidbit that is like off on a rant, but so Dr. Piff was mentioning that when they published that study about the cars, so at the time, a Prius was actually like an expensive car and was high up there. They got so many emails from people explaining themselves. You want to know what their explanation was?
Yes.
Well, because of the environment and how the car works, it actually hurts the environment to stop the car. And so it's better to keep going. And like in the podcast, he's like so nice to these people. And I'm like, that reasoning is BS. But, like coming up with these just like, oh, the rules for me are a little bit different, or because they are. Like you were mentioning, the rules are a little bit different. And so that's probably playing into some of this. But yeah, it might be one of the keys to being a vigilante if you don't have powers that like force the question on you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And we also have to remember Bruce became Batman in his early 20s. Think about the kind of person he could have been.
Yeah, especially because he was born into money.
With that much money. right? Like that's the reason I am impressed with Bruce Wayne is because the average person would have just said screw it and partied hard, possibly even just left Gotham high and dry because he's like, this place sucks. This is where my parents died. I can afford to literally go anywhere.
Yeah.
Didn't. Not only did he leave, he left, became a better person, and came back.
Yeah.
Right? That's the suspension of disbelief right there. That's where the suspension of disbelief is. And on top of that, we also have to remember he still has checks and balances in on himself. Whether it's Lucius being technically in charge of Wayne Enterprises, whether it's him telling Superman, like, hey, if you ever need to stop me, here's how. Whether
why isn't there a plan to stop you, Batman? The plan is you.
Right. Yeah. Yes. My favorite line.
Oh, so good.
It's such a good
I
line.
love
Like,
his storyline.
yeah. He's like, the standard billionaire would not put checks and balances in place to make sure he doesn't get out of line. They just, that's the thing.
So there's less they know about like different kinds of like, how did you come into the wealth? But they've looked at it at least some. And so one of the things that was mentioned was how, so earlier I was mentioning the more money you have, the more entitled you can tend to feel. So there are a few things that might fluctuate, like how entitled, how deserving you feel of that money, and like your empathy and whatnot. Interestingly, if you this lines up with other kinds of groups as well, but essentially, if you make it yourself, you tend to have less empathy for someone who's struggling because you have your own personal story of like, well, I did it, so therefore you should be able to do it. But another thing that they found, in terms of like, how did you get your money, is they looked at college students who have a lot of money and therefore very low likelihood that they actually earned that money themselves. They tend to have more of the sense of entitlement and deservedness for their money compared to their parents and the people who actually like built up and earned that money. So all this to say, like, there's a lot not known, but the trend would suggest that you're correct, that he's probably an outlier, especially, like boarding schools and all the private schools and everything, probably all these places, he's more of an outlier. It's hard to say because you can't just remove the intense, horrific trauma of his parents. And so it's hard to say what things would have looked like without that. You and I actually, oh gosh, what was the name of that comic? We actually looked at a comic where it's like, what if his parents didn't die? And he seemed like he was more of one of those obnoxious, like grew up rich kids. Absolute Power, I think, was the one. Was the comic. And so there are some storylines that toy with that, and some of them do suggest he might end up more along that trend if he didn't have that trauma background. But it's hard to say. It's hard to say how much of that is like Bruce, who he is as a person, or the people that he was surrounded by, or how much the trauma just hit him in a different way where, I mean, obviously it didn't take the money away, but he had other things that just impacted him so much that maybe just set him on a different track.
We also can't forget that this is Gotham that we are talking about. I don't think there's an amount of money that you can throw at that level of crime and corruption and it just fixes things. Like there has to be a system in place. This isn't just like, all right, if it was just an issue of we need to help the poor, we need to get people off the street, that'd be one thing. This is the Joker and Edward Nygma and Professor Pig and Black Mask and the Penguin. This is like next level stuff. And go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, and there are storylines that like plop in here and there that he's also, like he's also trying to put money into, like, how do we effectively treat and prevent that kind of crime, or, like treatment facilities, trying to improve them and this, that, and the other. So, I mean, he is trying to hit it from that angle, but you're right. That is a very different beast.
I mean, he really did push hard to put Harvey Dent in office, and that just went south with what happened to him.
Yeah.
He pushed hard.
That's true.
To get Harvey Dent in office, and it just, unfortunately, it went south. But it's just this, like Bruce could solve the problems in Gotham by just throwing money at it, isn't gonna work, because here's another thing. They just kill them. The mobsters, the people that are corrupt and all that, they would just have them killed. Like if that were the case, if he was just throwing money at everything to keep them from doing it, and they knew that it was him like doing it, that's why he became Batman. It's because the police system is so corrupt that he's saying, all right, fine, I'll be the middleman. I'll put these criminals down. Gordon, you take them. Oh, the court is corrupt. Oh, the asylum is corrupt. They're back on the street again. Rinse and repeat. Batman should only have to do his job once. It's the same criminals. It's the same criminals because the system is corrupt. That's the thing.
Arguably though, he should be focused on the system and not going out as Batman. Going out as Batman is probably a lot more satisfying to him than working on the systems.
Absolutely.
And look, that's true for anything. So this is not specific to Bruce Wayne, but there are certain things where you get more of that instant gratification, and other things that are like steering a giant ship, and you feel like you're beating your head against a wall. And so, it makes sense that he needs more than just focusing on the system. But I don't know, because if he's as good as he is at being Batman, he can find ways to work on the system without ending up dead.
He can. This is the thing too, because I'm also thinking about what happened when the system tried to do its job. Like I'm looking at the Dark Knight now, right? What happened to the judge that said, fine, I'll go after the mob? What happened to the district attorney that said, hey, fine, I'll go after the mob? These are people that were trying to do the right thing. They were trying to do the right thing. Like Gotham is a very different place.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And that's why it's a suspension of disbelief thing, because in a real world, when they caught the alligator man, he stays behind bars. They don't have to worry about him getting out. When they catch the Joker, he stays there. When they catch Oswald Cobblepot and he gets convicted of every single racketeering thing, he goes to ADX Florence in real life, right? That's where the suspension of disbelief is. It's like, hey, it's this billionaire and he's doing his very best to fight crime. And he's throwing money where it needs to go, but it's still not working. And so that's what's interesting, is because...
So I hear you.
So,
and
all right,
throwing money at things doesn't necessarily fix them. But at the end of the day, if I'm suspending my disbelief here, and I'm saying, okay, he can fix it as Batman, or he can like work on his Batman, then I'm like, think of just how inhumanly good at things he is as Batman. He can use that same tactical prowess to work within the system and make his, and I'm not saying like just using his money, but essentially like making sure to like rebalance the neighborhoods and all. I don't know. I'm like, he just wants to go out and beat up people at night too. Like, come on. Like some of it is he just wants to do that.
He has his hobbies. Some billionaires play golf.
Yeah. But I will definitely, I will absolutely give you though, that just because he stays rich, and just because, well, in particular, just because Gotham still struggles, doesn't mean he isn't trying to use his money for good. I will absolutely give you that. The excuse of like, oh, he needs to be Batman because he can't do it over here. Nah, I think that's more he just wants to be Batman. And like, I get it. Okay. Um, and he's got his quirks, and granted, Batman can do a lot of things that other people can't necessarily do. I just question, like, did it need to be Batman, or could he have done it more a mainstream way? Probably, but that doesn't make an interesting comic.
True. And also, here's the thing to also think about. In the DC universe, what if he didn't have that money? No Justice League. Think about how much worse Gotham would be, right? Like, and I'm not saying that like listen, I need my listeners to know that I am not advocating for billionaires existing in the real world. I'm advocating for this particular one existing on my bookshelf. Okay. Like, I cannot express this enough that I do not need to see any comments in our social media. Oh, Keeden's just another capitalist bastard. Get out of here. Like, no, that's not what is happening right now.
I actually think that that's a really important thing that you're highlighting here, because so as I was listening to that podcast episode, and Dr. Piff was talking about how a lot of what people with a lot of money will do is they will do things that maintain their own interests. And so there are like certain ways of like giving and doing philanthropy that there's still big question marks as to what that means, like what's behind that. And he was like, well, first off, if it's public, then there are other motivators going on for a person. How much it's the motivator of like looking good to other people versus like being good, it is a question mark. They don't know. But one of the concerns he mentioned was the fact that some of these extremely wealthy people are sharing ways that they're giving away big chunks of money. First off, they're not necessarily giving those big chunks of money to things that are better for everybody. It can appear that way, but in some ways can still maintain them staying on top and their own interests in some way. But also, there are tons not doing that and are definitely not in it to help other people. And so there can form this perception of like, well, look, there are good ones. So therefore, no reason for us to be against this extreme imbalance of wealth, because they're going to pay it forward and it's going to trickle down. That whole trickle down idea of like, well, it all balances out because they support the rest of us. But you have to be careful of that perception taking over when it's not the reality. So I think what you're saying is really important, because one of the things I thought to myself was like, oh no, if you really like got into Bruce Wayne and this idea of this character, it could inevitably affect how you look at very rich people in real life. And like you said, very different set of circumstances than this very fictional rich guy.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where we definitely live in an era now where the wealth gap between classes is so wide. It is wider than it has ever been. And so this isn't the same conversation that this is honestly a relatively new conversation we're having here, right? We weren't thinking about this when Bruce Wayne was rich in the 1940s. We were
1920s though. Would have been a different story.
Well, Gotham's on the East Coast. He can't help the Dust Bowl in the 30s. I'm just kidding.
Saying that Gilded Age wasn't that far back.
Listen, if I found out that Bruce was beating the hell out of Klansmen back then as well, I'm still on his team. Still got his poster on my wall. It is what a win's a win. Like, no, but yeah, it's very important to like know that this is a very different situation, because in the real world, if a person like this existed, you would think it's impossible, because historically, the reason there are billionaires out there, none of them are just self-made, right? Historically, it's because someone was harmed, someone was affected, someone got done wrong.
Well, and that's the thing, is even if you are technically self-made, if you are making a ton of money and people working for you are on food stamps or on SNAP,
Right.
you are not the superhero good guy.
Right.
And that's why, I was
Right.
asking about like, well, how does his company run? We like Billie Eilish, you probably heard about her like recent speech where she was essentially
Yes.
billionaires, what are you doing? Why do you have all this money? And then gave away, she's helping to support things with like it's like a quarter of her wealth or whatever. That's how it sounds like Bruce Wayne is usually mostly written in the comics, is essentially like, if I have this money, let me try and use it toward bettering society, balancing things out. There's a question mark of how he stays as rich as he is if he's also doing all of those things you're talking about. And there's definitely the
Yes.
question mark of like, is Batman really the best use of your time in order to like move things forward, or do you just really like beating up people? But that being said, yeah, I would also like to keep his story on my bookshelf.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, it's the story of a very awesome superhero and the story of a good billionaire.
Fiction.
A fairy tale. Fairy tale. Absolute fairy tale. Once upon a time, bullshit.
Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Emilia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keeden Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JBS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.